Spoiler alert! This video is not just going to be about a bunch of Jordan Peele movies, because we've talked about most of them already. But don't worry, we've got a lot of other good stuff to talk about, so stay tuned. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. But in short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. Today's subgenre is black horror, or as I'm calling it, horror noir. And the term horror noir, as far as I can tell, comes from a recent documentary that I saw on Shudder, and I think it premiered on Shudder, called Horror Noire, The History of Black Horror. And so I really loved the term, primarily because we've already talked about Blaxploitation on the channel, which is black horror. And so the term black horror by itself does kind of seem maybe a little synonymous with Blaxploitation, but there's a lot of black horror that doesn't really quite fit the bill. It's a little bit more serious, or maybe a little bit more highbrow, or a little bit higher budget, or usually higher budget. And it definitely deserves having a light shined on it, having some conversations about it, because there's a lot of really interesting, cool, compelling stuff here that doesn't really quite get covered by the Blaxploitation subgenre. As it turned out, we've already covered a lot of the movies that you might expect to see in a subgenre for black horror, horror noir. Movies like Get Out and Us and People Under the Stairs, even Candyman. We've already covered these, begging the question of whether or not I actually needed to do this. But I did think that there was enough here to talk about, especially after watching that documentary, which is excellent, by the way. I highly recommend it. Enough to talk about, to distinguish between Blaxploitation and horror noir or black horror, and just really great movies to talk about, and not really finding another place to put them into. I figured it's a good idea to give it its own subgenre, let it breathe, let it have its own space, and we can talk about a lot of the themes that we're talking about here. And really, a lot of those themes are going to center around race, because what we're talking about when we're talking about black horror are black artists, black filmmakers, black actors. It's usually movies with black cast or black main characters, made by a black director, and/or written by a black writer, and telling stories from a black perspective. Something that is uniquely different from a lot of what I'll call white horror, frankly. Movies where the black characters are the friend, the side character, or, as this trope always goes, the ones who die first in the slasher movies. These are movies that kind of put that aside and show a different perspective, something that feels very fresh and original, even though it's really not. It's really something that's been around for, a long, long time, decades and decades. But it's nice to see this perspective being allowed to take center stage, to shine, and really give it a voice, if you will. But what's great about these movies is that I feel that while they are made by black artists and generally are aimed at a black audience, they have a universal appeal. By and large, the movies that we're going to talk about are accessible to everyone. Their themes are universal. You're just seeing these themes from a black perspective. So if you're seeing things like coming of age or survival or trying to make a living, trying to be recognized or heard, these are things that can apply to everybody. But you're seeing it from the black perspective, which just gives it a fresh angle, something that's interesting and gives the movies a little bit more weight. Hence the distinction between Blaxploitation, which is oftentimes just a lot of fun, and maybe there's a social message involved, but it really is leaning in towards the exploitation and luridness. These are movies that are a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more serious, and as a result, what we're looking at today, a lot of it toes the line of what you would consider horror. We're going to talk about this individually as we go through the movies, but there's some movies here that some people are just going to say are straight up dramas. And I wouldn't even actually fight them on that. There are some movies here that are straight up dramas with just like some supernatural elements or horror elements like dripped in, but I'm putting them in here anyways because I felt they were important enough to talk about, and I think they're really, really good. The quality of the movies we are to talk about today, excellent. We're talking about some really great stuff today. As usual, we're going to rank them in our undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate level style, and in this case, we're going to go into the case of they're going to get more and more mainstream, or more and more well known and have more and more cachet as we go on. So that'll be fun. We'll start out with something a little bit less known and end with something that's a little bit more broad appeal, bigger hit kind of thing. So with that, let's go ahead and explore horror noir, black horror. The first black horror film that we're talking about today, the undergraduate level selection, is Sweetheart. Sweetheart came out in 2019, and it's going to be a little bit difficult for us to talk about this movie without me spoiling it, but I'm going to do my ever-loving best because not spoiling the movie is a key component of it, and it's something that the director was striving to get towards. He wanted to keep the plot of the movie and what it was about as secret as possible so he could go in with as fresh of a perspective as possible. And I'm going to try to preserve that, even though it's going to be a little bit difficult. But we're going to talk about all that, the director's motivations and intentions in just a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie starts with our protagonist, Kiersey Clemens, being washed up on shore on this deserted desert island after a apparent shipwreck. We're not shown the shipwreck, but judging from her attire, you can kind of tell that she was on a ship of some sort and it must have crashed. And she washes up with a friend of hers who is mortally injured, and she has to figure out how to survive. And as she explores the island, she starts to realize that she might be stuck here for a while and things might get a little problematic as she tries to survive alone on this island. But is she alone? And we're going to stop there because that's about as far as I want to go in giving you information about the plot of this movie. Because like I said, the director of this movie wanted to keep it kind of under wraps. In fact, part of the mystery of the movie is the title Sweetheart, which in a vacuum doesn't tell you anything. And as the movie goes on, you'll understand what the meaning of the title is. But just hearing it doesn't tip your hand on anything. And telling you that it is about a woman stranded on a desert island is all you need. It's all you need to know. And it's all you should know. Because letting this movie unfold and not knowing what it's about is the way to experience it. It's the way I experienced it, and it's great. And you'll have to kind of take my word for that. But I will say this is a firmly in horror movie. We talked about how some of these movies might just be considered more dramas. This is definitely a horror movie. But it's interesting because you can see some of the influences right off the bat, like Castaway, Tom Hanks and stuff like that. I got Kiersey Clemens basically playing the Tom Hanks role and playing it extremely well. For those of you who aren't familiar, Kiersey Clemens, who was in the movie Dope, she's in the DC movies as Iris West, the girlfriend of the Flash. So she's pretty well known. And she's excellent here, and it's important because she's carrying this film. As you can imagine, large parts of this movie are just her, and they are dialogue-free because she's got nobody to talk to. So you're kind of relying on her ability to act with her face, with her body, conveying emotions, conveying a sense of mood. And it works like gangbusters. Credit both Kiersey and the director for being able to pull this off. It's compelling. It's a really great movie in that it draws you in right off the bat. And that is part of the intention. Not only did the director want to keep this plot under wraps, he wanted to really focus on how so many horror movies focus on like a heavy backstory to kind of set up the movie. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to eschew the backstory and drop you right into the movie. He wanted you to have this sense of mystery, like trying to figure out and fill in the blanks of what had happened and what was going on and who this person was that you were following. And it works. It works. It starts with her landing on the beach and everything goes from there, and it goes quickly. This is a fleet movie. It's under 90 minutes long, and it packs a lot into that time period, and you never feel bored. It never drags. It never feels like it's going slowly. You're wrapped into it because of this mystery, because right off the bat, you're in it. You want to know what's going on, and it doesn't take long for you to realize that things are not as they seem and things are not going to go super well. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to leave it at that. And man, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to not give up too much in this movie, but I want to respect the director's intentions because I do think it's a great experience going in and being surprised. And the other thing that was surprising for me, at least, was when I did the research on this movie after the fact and seeing some of the social messages that they were trying to convey in this movie by kind of addressing like basically the idea of the hysterical black girl, about black people not being believed about the things that are being done to them or happening to them. in particular black women, and how they kind of just get dismissed as being hysterical. Interesting, and it's something that I frankly missed when I was watching it because I don't have the black perspective really. And so reading about that and seeing how that was done, but done in such a subtle, not confrontational, not in your face way, but giving you that message and putting that into the story, really effective, making it accessible, making it entertaining because it is a plot point. It is a plot point that people don't believe her and the backstory that she has. Again, I'm brushing up against things I don't want to spoil, but it really worked well. It's the best way to try to work social commentary into your movies is to make it germane to the story itself so that it doesn't feel shoehorned in. And they crush this here. The movie is beautiful. It looks fantastic. It's got some really great shots in there that just set up the dread or set up the concerns, and it really sets this tone of tension and fear. And you've got that, the thing that you always get in these movies where you kind of think about what would you do. And in this case, Kirsten Clemens' character winds up being rather resourceful to the point where she was doing things that I necessarily wouldn't have thought of, but she's not always successful. And that I like too. They showed her try things that didn't necessarily work or didn't work very well. So it wasn't like she was just amazingly, magically capable of doing everything. She had some trial and error. While she's shown as being having a lot of ingenuity, she also failed sometimes, and that humanized her. That made it feel more realistic, more interesting, and frankly more scary. But the scares get ratcheted up really fast. This movie's not going to disappoint. Watch it and then we'll talk about it in the comments because, again, this is a movie that hasn't been seen a lot, but is very well received. The reviews of it are very, very good, very positive. It's got, a lot of good buzz, good word of mouth, but it doesn't seem like it's really got a lot of widespread appeal. And that's a shame because it deserves it. It really is interesting to see this story done in this manner, to make this kind of movie with this perspective. And I know I'm being vague, but trust me, you'll be glad I did when you check it out. So when you do get a chance to see it, let's talk about it in the comments. And of course, if you've seen it already, let me know what you thought of it. But Sweetheart, super high on this one. It's a high recommend from me. The second black horror film that we're looking at today, the graduate level selection, is Eve's Bayou. Eve's Bayou came out in 1997 and is an example of one of these movies that really might arguably be more drama than horror. In fact, I probably would say it's a little bit more drama than horror, but I'm liberal about that, as you know, and am willing to call it horror. And honestly, this movie pops up a lot in lists of like the best black horror movies, and even was talked about in that Horror Noire documentary that I was referencing. So I feel fairly justified in talking about it here because it has enough supernatural elements to it to fall in a horror movie, even though it's not really super scary. But we're going to get into all that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is a period piece about a 10-year-old girl. It's kind of a coming-of-age story as she grows up in rural Louisiana. Her dad is a doctor, and her family is kind of well-to-do and well-respected in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of family drama and kind of town drama going on. And then there's a voodoo element. That her aunt is something of a voodoo practitioner, and there's another voodoo practitioner of the town, and a impulsive child does some things that maybe shouldn't be done and messes with some magics that shouldn't be messed with, and hijinks abound, I guess, if you will. And the hijinks, again, are not the point of the movie, really. It really does lean heavily into the drama. It really is a coming-of-age story, but it's a damn good one. And the movie is directed by Kasi Lemmons, who I always think of as Jodie Foster's friend in Silence of the Lambs. Again, the best friend black character, but she went on to have quite the directing career, did movies like Harriet, the Whitney Houston movie that came out recently, but this was her first movie. Eve's Bayou was her first movie, and she crushes this. It's so well made, it's so well directed, and for a first-time director to do this movie and make this good of a film the first time out the gate is impressive, and it's a big part of why this movie got so much notoriety. The debut of Kasi Lemmons as a director was a thing. It got a lot of press. It got a lot of acclaim, and deservedly so, because it is an impressive debut. It is just a really well-made movie, and credit Sam Jackson, who helped get this movie made by signing on to be the lead and doing something that, if you're used to Sam Jackson from the Marvel movies or him saying MF and stuff like that, this is a little bit of a different role for him, a pretty interesting and pretty challenging role, and he's excellent. In fact, everybody in the movie is pretty darn good. Journey Smollett is playing the lead girl, and she is really, really compelling. Megan Good playing her sister, also really good. Everybody in the movie is giving quality performances, and that's important, again, because the drama is really what's selling this movie, and the family drama in particular. And it really does a good job of capturing the perspective of this 10-year-old girl as seeing the world through her perspective as a young black girl in Louisiana of a fairly affluent family, but still a black family. It's really fascinating, but then seeing basically black culture in a way that you don't usually see it. You know, period piece, rural Louisiana, well-to-do, affluent black folk is not usually, especially in 1997, it's not the kind of movie you usually see when you think about black movies. You know, you're thinking Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society and things like that. You're seeing like the gang culture or like, you know, slavery type movies and stuff like that. This movie gave a fresh story, a fresh perspective. It was one that it's not based on Casey Lemon's life, but it was something that she kind of grew up with. And so she was speaking from a place of truth, and it's a fresh perspective. It really is fascinating to see this world, a world that, you know, I personally am not very familiar with, but I do love Louisiana culture, so I was definitely 100% wrapped into this, and the drama works very well. It's very compelling. Even without the supernatural horror elements, this movie would work. But the supernatural horror elements work really, really well for me too, because as you may know from previous videos, I love me some voodoo culture stuff. Voodoo stuff works for me in film. I tend to love it. And I think the stuff that's done here is very cool. They play a lot with like how voodoo works and like the commercialism of voodoo to make a living basically, but also tapping into like the belief of it and kind of some of the irony of it, kind of the monkey's paw style irony of it. And I don't want to give anything away, so I won't go into that too much, but I really liked how they touched on that and how they made it a key part of the movie. So yeah, does it feel like it deserves to be a horror movie? Yeah, I think it does, but it's not going to scare you. It really isn't going to scare you, but it'll compel you. I think it'll draw you in. I think it's a great story. I think the ending works really, really well, even though they kind of literally tell you how it's going to end right at the beginning of the movie, because, you know, it's told in kind of like a narrative style, with a narrator, and it works actually. But it's great. You know, the debate of whether it's like a Southern Gothic drama, which is usually what I see it called, versus a Southern Gothic horror. Honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it. Just it matters that you watch it, because it's important. It's got a lot of esteem in terms of black film, not just black horror, but black film period. So it's definitely something that's important to watch. But it's not even like homework, because it's really good. It's a really compelling story. Again, it's not going to be super scary or anything like that, but it's just so well made. The performances are so good, and it's such an interesting story and an interesting slice of life that it's definitely worth your watch. So if you haven't seen it before, check it out. But I'm guessing a lot of you have, because it's a pretty well-known and pretty famous film. So let's go ahead and just keep that conversation going in the comments below. And the last black horror movie that we're looking at today, the postgraduate level selection, is Nope. Nope came out in 2022 and is a Jordan Peele film. And yes, I said we weren't really doing a bunch of Jordan Peele films. We are doing this one because we had not talked about this one before. It's much more recent. It came out more recently, and I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. And this is where we're going to do it because, you know, I love me some Jordan Peele, even though my opinion about this movie may not really jive with the rest of the world. It was a very popular movie, and I might not be as high on it as everybody else. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a pair of siblings, brother and sister, who wrangle horses. They're horse wranglers for films, and they are trying to prove the existence of a UFO that they think is hovering near their cattle ranch or their horse ranch, and they are trying to figure out a way to document its existence and get it on film. And there is a lot of other subtextual stuff going on that is pretty interesting, but maybe a little bit underserved. And I don't want to get into too much more because I don't want to spoil the movie. So we'll stop there. But if you've seen a Jordan Peele movie before, you know what his thing is. You know that he's going to tackle some sort of social commentary issue, but he's going to do it in a very traditional horror, basically fun ride kind of way. And Nope is no different than, say, Get Out or Us in that respect, that he wants to basically tell you an alien story. But he wants to also make some interesting commentary at the same time. And for the most part, I think it works. He's weaving in some interesting themes here, themes about exploitation, especially exploitation of animals, and the exploitation of the film industry as a whole, and the history of Black people in film, Black film, and how it is underrepresented or actually really under-recognized. The achievements and the accomplishments of early Black filmmakers really aren't celebrated. So this movie is really kind of trying to shine a light on that, all in the package of trying to catch a UFO on film. And it, like I said, this stuff works, but there's some part of me that feels like it's a little underserved, and I'll try to explain. Some of these themes that we're being given are kind of addressed somewhat in flashbacks. In particular, some flashbacks of the Stephen Yoon's character as he was a child actor working with a gorilla or an ape. And there's a whole flashback there that is absolutely compelling. It's a wonderful, wonderful scene, just done so well. Super tense, really creepy, unsettling, off-putting, and ultimately just kind of gut-punching. And it's maybe the best part of the movie. And there's part of me that kind of wants that movie because that looks amazing. And you're just kind of giving it a little bit as flashback in this movie. And this movie is good, but like I was saying, I don't know if it's as good as everybody was saying. People are kind of predisposed to love Jordan Peele, and I'm frankly one of them. His first two movies I thought were excellent. And so I think people just went in expecting to like this movie. And I don't want to say I was let down because that might be overstating it, but I don't think that I was blown away as much as I was by the first two movies. And maybe it's because, again, of those expectations that were raised pretty high. Maybe it's because I don't have the same affinity for an alien story as I do for some of these other horror tropes or horror themes that he was working with in the previous movies. But I don't think that's the case because I do love me a good alien movie. I'm not really sure what it is because there's a lot to like with the movie. There is the design of the alien itself is absolutely fantastic. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. It takes a stereotypical alien UFO aesthetic and quite literally turns it on its head. And that is fantastic. It's also one of the best parts of the movie. I think if I were to zero in on what kind of missed the mark for me on this movie, it's probably Keke Palmer. Because Keke Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya play the siblings. And Daniel Kaluuya is always good. I love the guy. He does such incredible work. He was so great in Get Out. He's great in pretty much everything he does. And Keke Palmer is a very likable person. I've seen her before and I've liked her. In this movie, it really rides on her performance. And you've got to find her charming as hell. And I don't. I find her to be a bit grating. Her character and her kind of like lackadaisical, like life-loving, carefree character who's a little bit pushy and a little bit, confrontational, rubbed me the wrong way. I found it challenging to root for her, especially when she's butting heads with her much more subdued and calm brother. It really, I don't know, I didn't take to the character very well, and I think you're kind of supposed to. And I think if you find her charm working for you in this movie, I think the ride's going to be a lot smoother. But for me, I had a lot of trouble riding with her on that one. I didn't hate her, and I don't think the performance is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying the character as written wasn't working for me, and Keke Palmer's natural charm wasn't enough to get me past that. And that's really probably the biggest roadblock for me for the movie. But that your mileage may vary on that. I know a lot of people who thought she was the best part of the movie, and those people loved the film. So I do think I'm onto something there, that might be part of what missed the mark for me. Because otherwise, this movie is working really well. It's got a lot to say. And again, maybe almost too much to say. It's really kind of biting off a lot. And at the same time, it's also kind of like an homage movie. It's definitely got a Spielbergian influence to it. You see the Close Encounters influence. You see even like a Jurassic Park influence. You see some other things. And Jordan Peele's admitted to these influences. And it's showing like a love for filmmaking. like there's so much of this filmmaker love and kind of working in filmmaking history into it that it's very clear. It's wearing its aspirations on its sleeves about wanting to be kind of a love letter to filmmaking, and in particular black filmmaking. But at the same time, it's also talking about this exploitation stuff that, again, works really well, very compelling and important stuff to talk about. But it's trying to do it all in a standard feature length movie. That's a challenge. I don't think it cripples the movie. I don't think the movie falls apart as a result of it. But I do think that the movie's a little overstuffed. And as a result, doesn't breathe as well as Get Out or Us did, and it makes the message a little bit muddier, a little bit harder to decipher or to absorb or to embrace. And so, I have a friend who said when she had seen the movie that she felt it was like The Emperor Has No Clothes. Like she couldn't understand why she didn't like it and everybody else was raving about it. And while I don't think I'd go as far as her on that, I do understand what she's saying. I felt like people were getting more out of it or maybe embracing those themes and really understanding it much better than I was. And I understand I've watched some videos about this on YouTube and people explaining why it's great. And there's a lot of subtext here, a lot. Like so much so that it almost feels like you'd have to do your homework before you go to the movie to really fully appreciate and embrace it. And I'll be honest, watching those videos helped me appreciate the movie more. I just don't feel like I should have to go do homework before I go and see the movie. I should be able to absorb a lot of that without having to do that like I did with, say, Get Out. So that's my thing on Nope. It's not my favorite Jordan Peele movie. It's my least favorite Jordan Peele movie, actually. But it's still great. It's still worth watching for sure because Jordan Peele's that good of a filmmaker, and he's done some really, really cool stuff here. There's some amazing shots here. It overall is definitely a recommend. It's definitely something you should check out if you haven't already because, again, this is the most mainstream of the movies that we're talking about. This is one that was pretty popular, a pretty big hit. So you've probably already seen it. So we can talk more in the comments below. Let me know how much you liked Nope and what it is about it that really speaks for you. Tell me what you think I'm wrong about. We can have a civil discussion about this. I know my opinion is in the minority, so let's have a little bit of a debate about it in the comments. But Nope, it's definitely a recommend, but it's not my favorite. But I definitely felt we had to talk about it here in this subgenre. So that's going to do it for our exploration into the horror noir black horror subgenre. And as you can see, there was a lot of great movies to talk about. In fact, there's a few more because I got some extra credit for you to talk about as well that are also really good. So let's jump into those. The first movie that I'm going to talk about for extra credit is Beloved. Beloved came out in 1998 and was made by Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey was pushing it based on a book from Toni Morrison, a black author who is critically acclaimed. I believe she won the Nobel Prize for Literature for this book, if I recall correctly. And so it's an important book. And so it was ostensibly an important movie, but it didn't do so well in the box office and really doesn't get a lot of love. That is probably unfortunate because it is an excellent movie. But we're going to get into all that in just a second. If you haven't seen it before, the movie follows a former slave and her children living in Ohio in post-slavery America, trying to make a living, trying to make a go for it, and dealing with some past trauma, obviously. And they are visited by a mysterious young girl, like a 20-year-old woman, who doesn't speak very clearly and is kind of very childlike, but might be the reincarnation of our lead character's previously deceased daughter. And hijinks abound, I guess. But the thing about Beloved that you have to understand is Beloved really is another one of these movies where it feels much more like a drama, notwithstanding the supernatural elements of the movie. There are a lot of supernatural elements of the movie, and I think it's fair to call it a horror movie, but it is like a historical drama epic, really. The movie is almost 3 hours long, which honestly might be a bit of an issue, but it's got a lot to cover, a lot to tell, and a lot of character to explore. I've read the Toni Morrison book, Beloved. It is fantastic. It's been a while since I've read it, but it is an excellent book. It blew me away how good it was. And it does a great job of weaving in this supernatural storyline with this historical drama and with these characters, this character drama, to make a really rich and compelling read that moves by really quickly. So the length of this movie feels a little bit of a slog because it doesn't feel quite as fleet, but I understand why they're trying to do it. They're really trying to set the mood. They're trying to set the story, the whole setting of the story, because it's important. The time period is important, so you need to kind of establish that. And they do it in a way that is not very tropesy. It's not very common. They really do set it in a way that they minimize the obvious things that you would think of in like a post-slavery story. There's still stuff there because it has to be for the story, but it's not it's not as focused on like the slave aspect of it as you might expect, and I think that was the right decision. But it does introduce the supernatural elements early in the movie, and then it carries out throughout the movie. So that's there. Honestly, everything in the movie works really, really well for me for the most part. Oprah Winfrey, we forget because she's Oprah, because she's a billionaire and a talk show host and an activist and everything. We forget that she's a damn good actor. She's really good in this movie. Really, really good in this movie. And Danny Glover, as a former slave that is kind of a potential love interest for her, is also doing work that if you just know him as Murtaugh, you'll be surprised at how good he is. The movie, it's cast well. Everybody's doing a great job. The one thing though, is Thandaway Newton playing the returned daughter, or supposed returned daughter, Beloved, and her name is Beloved because when she died, her mom didn't have enough money to put anything other than the word Beloved on her tombstone, so that's her name. And she comes back, and Thandaway Newton, who credited as Tandy Newton in the movie because that's what she was going by at the time, she gives a performance that is interesting. She's supposed to be playing it kind of childlike, and here's the thing. When she's not talking, when she's just acting with her face and her body and giving these looks and kind of just moving in a certain way, she's fantastic. It's unsettling, it's creepy, it's mysterious. You really want to know more about her. You're drawn into her because she's beautiful, but you're also put off by her because she's kind of off. But when she talks, especially as she starts to talk more as the movie goes on, she plays it kind of like somebody who's mentally challenged, and I understand it because she's supposed to be a 20-year-old who's kind of childlike. That kind of is the instinct, but it rides the line of being like kind of comical or laughable or even offensive. It rides that line. It's not as bad as like Donnie Wahlberg in Dreamcatcher, but it's not great sometimes. There's sometimes where it just slides into what feels almost like parody, and it takes me out of the movie a little bit. So that's my biggest mark against it, that and the length of the movie, but otherwise quality movie, doing a really good job of adapting the book and trying to weave in these concepts, these themes, and the character motivations and the character drama, for the most part succeeding. Again, could maybe trim the fat a little bit on this movie, but for the most part it's succeeding and it's trying to let the story breathe, and I think that was the right decision. But maybe we're all wrong because the movie bombed. It bombed, and Oprah was very unhappy that it bombed, understandably so. But it bombed, I think, because it's a 3-hour historical drama about post-slavery America. That is not an easy sell. If they maybe played up the horror aspects of it, perhaps it would have gone over better, and made more money. But that's a hard sell, man. And it's a hard sell. Me telling you what the movie's about, maybe a bit of a hard sell. It's not the easiest watch, not because it's super uncomfortable. It's a little uncomfortable, but just because it's got it's a period of time that's not fun to sit in, and it's not shying away from that stuff. There's some really tough things to do, and it was based on true events. Toni Morrison was influenced by accounts of actual former slaves telling about their experiences, and it's rough. It's rough stuff. So maybe not for everybody, maybe a little bit of a tough watch, but an excellent movie. Definitely one that should be seen. Definitely one that I think is very comfortably being considered horror. And if you don't feel like you can't watch the movie, maybe read the book, because the book is amazing. Excellent stuff in the book. So I recommend both for sure. And if you've seen it, let me know what you think. If you've read the book, let me know what you think. And we can keep talking about it in the comments below, because it's definitely one that deserves to be talked about. The next extra credit movie I want to talk to you guys about is called His House. His House came out in 2020 and is definitely, even though it's more recent, seems to be one that is not very well known at all. I don't hear people talking about it very much, but it does pop up on the occasional Black Horror Best of list. And it's a great movie that it seems like it's flown under the radar. And maybe once again, because of the subject matter being a little bit, not fun to delve into, but we're going to delve into it right now. If you haven't seen it before, the story is about Sudanese refugees who flee to London because they have to flee their war-torn country, and they get set up there through the government into this housing project, and they're given a house to live in, and the house seems to be haunted, and they're trying to deal with the ghosts of the house, but those ghosts may not be germane to the house. They may actually have followed them from Sudan, and are tormenting them for some of the things that had to be done in order to be able to get to the house here in London. And I'm going to leave it there and not spoil the hijinks for you, because there are some hijinks in this movie, and it works very well. It's definitely a horror movie, but it is also a very powerful drama. And I guess you'd call it kind of elevated horror in a way, because the scares in that are allegorical for, well, frankly, guilt, right? It really is a pretty heavy movie tackling ideas and themes of guilt and doing it really, really well. The movie is talking about or shining a light on refugee experiences that, we hear about refugees a lot in the news and stuff like that, but I don't think we really understand exactly what's going on, exactly what it means to leave their country, what they have to go through to get to where they're going, and what it's like for them to experience when they get here, and the restrictions that are placed on them, and the things that they have to deal with. And some of it might be obvious, but some of it I don't think is as obvious. And most importantly, seeing it from this perspective is, again, kind of refreshing, kind of an eye-opening thing. It feels like a fresh perspective, because it is. It's something we don't see very often. And setting it in London rather than the US maybe kind of makes it a little less incendiary to a US audience, but it still captures a lot of the same concepts, same topics, same themes, same points that are addressed here in this country. And it really is a well-made movie with some really fun scares in it. So even though you're tackling some very serious subject matter, very serious, it's going to keep it light enough with the horror elements that I think it balances out pretty nicely. See, at least I felt it did. Some people might feel the veers a little too heavy on the drama than the horror. I felt like it nailed it both, nailed the balance really, really well. I felt like the visuals were really cool. They had some really great imagery in this movie to kind of illustrate some of these dream type or vision type experiences that the couple is having in the house, this husband and wife couple. And I have to make special mention of Wunmi Musaku, who plays the wife, because she steals every scene she's in. Like, all the acting in this is very good, but she really, really carries this movie, because it's really about the husband and the wife, and it focuses a lot on the husband. But when it shifts focus to the wife, man, that's when it gets really good, because her story is super compelling and she just sells it. Her performance is so understated and so heart-wrenching. It's just absolutely fantastic. I was blown away by this movie, blown away because it made me feel stuff. It really made me feel for these characters, and really kind of care about like the refugee issue at large, something I don't know a lot about. And this was interesting to kind of get a boots on the ground view of that, but also in a fun horror way. I use the word fun loosely here, but it does do a good job of making use of this concept and tying into it horror elements to explore grief and loss and guilt. And again, I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want to spoil the movie, but the revelations turn this movie on its head, are shocking, and made me not know what to feel by the end of it. So it was very compelling. I highly recommend this movie, and I'm guessing a lot of you haven't seen it, because again, this one doesn't seem like it gets a lot of buzz, and it's a shame because it deserves some buzz. Check it out if you haven't seen it, and then let me know what you think of it, because His House is it's a powerful movie, and a really excellent example of what a Black perspective can do in a film. In this case, a Black refugee perspective. Masterful, absolutely masterfully made. High recommend. And the last extra credit movie I'm going to mention today is Candyman. Candyman came out in 2021, and yeah, I've already talked about Candyman. I talked about the original Candyman, and when I did mention this version, this new, not really a remake. It's really, they call it a reboot, but it's really a sequel. And so, am I cheating here? Not really, because I didn't really put this on the syllabus. I put the original on the syllabus, but I did already talk about this. But I'm going to talk about it again because I love it. I love it, and I really wanted to put it in here. So. I couldn't talk myself out of it. So here we go. If you haven't seen it before, the movie is a sequel to the original Candyman movie, even though it was packaged kind of as like more of a reboot. I guess it kind of is, because it gives a new mythology to the Candyman character, the slasher who comes and you say his name 5 names and has a hook hand, but it explores it a different way with this artist who goes to Cabrini Green, or the former Cabrini Green projects, and explores the Candyman mythology, only to run afoul of the Candyman myth, and hijinks start to abound, of course, and we will leave it there. I don't want to spoil the movie too much, obviously, but it was a fresh reimagining or continuation of the Candyman storyline, adding so many new layers to it. And again, black perspective, black filmmaker Nia DaCosta, produced by Jordan Peele, black cast Yahya Abdul-Mateen, who I love, who I think is fantastic in everything he does, and he's great here. It really did a great job of adding to the Candyman mythos with characters that were compelling, with a story that was really good. That again, it seems like it's kind of a remake, but it actually is a sequel. And I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but I think that's a spoiler that's kind of come out now. At this point, people know that. And that's what I loved about it. It was that it was continuing the original Candyman storyline. It didn't throw that away. It added to it. It fleshed it out. It made it bigger and more interesting. And I love it. I know that it was very well received and very popular, but I also know there's people who didn't love it so much for whatever various reasons. I thought, again, that Yahya is fantastic in the role. I found him very compelling to watch. I liked all of the characters. I liked all of the characters in this movie, and I liked how it connected to the original movie, and I especially liked the new mythology. The idea of there not just being one Candyman. This is something that was hinted at in the first movie, but not really explored. And I really thought it was a clever idea to turn that and spin it out to making Candyman. It opened up the doors for all kinds of Candyman stories to show different perspectives. And it really focused on these new interesting ideas like gentrification. Cabrini Green, the project, is now being gentrified into nicer, newer areas. And so that is a cool modern day issue to look at through the prism or the lens of the Candyman myth, tying in the past, former slave, lynching background of the original character played by Tony Todd and folding that into this story about modern day black issues. Fantastic. And again, it's, Jordan Peele producing, so he's going to get his social commentary in there in a way that doesn't feel like it's going to detract from the story and make you feel like you're having less fun. And Nia DaCosta directs the hell out of this movie. It looks great. It's got great pacing. It's got great scares, and it really is setting up the tone of what's happening to Yahya's character and the deterioration of his life, let's just call it that, really, really well. I loved it. I'm a Candyman fan. If you remember the video when we talked about Candyman, I was praised it quite a bit. I'm a big fan of Tony Todd. So, I was probably predisposed to like this one, but they also could have gone the other way. I could have gone the other way and really been, put off by what they did had they done something less cool. We've seen a lot of franchises get revisited and they don't work out so well. Sometimes it's a bad idea to go back to the well so many times. Candyman could have gone that way, but it didn't. It felt like it had something fresh and original and interesting to say while honoring and enhancing what came before. One of my favorite quote unquote reboots of the horror genre, at all in total. Like I struggle to find other ones that I think are better. So this is high on my list. So yeah, I'm enthusiastic about it. I was going to put something else here because there's a lot of other good movies to talk about, but I kept coming back to this. I kept wanting to talk more about it. So here we are. And I know a lot of you have seen this one, so we can talk about it more in the comments. And if you think that I'm being over effusive or if you think that something else should have got this slot, let me know in the comments. And I'll respect the opinion, of course, but I'm a big fan of this new Candyman, so I had to talk about it. So that's going to do it for exploration into the horror noir subgenre, black horror. And again, thanks to Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror, the documentary, for inspiring me to explore black horror as a subgenre, to explore horror noir, to borrow that term, frankly, because I love this stuff. I think it's great. I think there's a lot of really interesting movies to talk about. And again, highly recommend that documentary. It's exceptional. It's black artists talking about the history of black horror, and there's a lot of great stuff that you know about, a lot of great stuff you don't know about, a lot of stuff that we've talked about on this channel, and definitely worth your time watching that one. But now it's time to watch me read a horror trivia pursuit card. As you know, I like to read one of these questions on camera live, and you can see if I got it right. And we're going to talk about let's do the psychological category, because a lot of these movies are more psychological horror than anything else. So the question is, which character in 1997's Cube helps design the cube-shaped prison? Quentin McNeil, David Worth, Dr. Helen Holloway, or Joan Levin? And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer to this question. Okay? And normally I would complain. You've seen a lot of me complaining lately about these questions that have multiple choice because I feel like they make them too easy by making multiple choice. I do not have that issue here because I don't know any of these people. I've seen Cube. I like Cube. We talked about Cube in the movie and on the channel. But I don't know these characters. And again, it comes up all the time in these trivia questions. I don't really do super well with character names. And so had they not given me multiple choice, I would not have remembered any of these names. So I'm going to be left with a guess, okay? And there's 4 choices to choose from. So, if you guys remember Cube, you guys maybe remember the names better than I do. And maybe you've already jumped to the answer. You know the answer to this. You're calling me a fool. That's cool, man. I don't know. I'm starting to look at these questions, these answers, these characters, and try to use my deductive reasoning to solve this. And I'm down to 2. And I'll tell you which 2 that I'm down to. Lock in your answers, but I'll tell you the 2 that I'm into. I'm leaning towards either Quentin McNeil or Dr. Helen Holloway. And my reason for it is, well, Quentin just sounds like the kind of person who'd make that cube, right? Like people named Quentin, it sounds like a name of somebody who's up to no good, really. Apologies to anybody out there who's named Quentin who's watching this, or to Quentin Tarantino. But the Quentin name, I don't know, man. I don't know if I trust it. David and Joan, I got no problems with that. But Dr. Helen Holloway, because a doctor seems like somebody who would put together that cube-shaped prison. And it's been a minute since I've seen this movie, so I don't remember. I don't remember if it was male or female. I don't remember any of that. So I've got nothing on this question. So I'm going to guess. And I'm going to go against my Quentin... no, actually, no. I take that back. It was my first instinct, was Quentin. So I'm going to stick with my Quentin bias. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to say Quentin McNeil. Quentin McNeil's the guy. I'm locking in my answer. Let's find out who was right. David Worth. It's David Worth, you sneaky David. Oh, I trusted you, David. I trusted you. I have no idea, man. It's been a long time since I've seen Cube, and I just did not remember at all. And I wouldn't have gotten that without the multiple choice. And even with multiple choice, I didn't get it, but I'm betting some of you guys did. Let me know in the comments below if you got it right, and if you didn't, which one did you guess, and why? Do you hate Quentins also? I don't hate Quentins. I'm just kidding. But it does sound like a nefarious name, doesn't it? The Q names sound nefarious. They just do. We've gone way off track here. Let's get back on track here. Thank you guys very much for hanging out, for listening to me talk about black horror, because it's some great stuff. Hopefully you'll check out some of these movies and let me know what you think of them. And if you've got recommendations of other great black horror movies, leave them in the comments below, and we'll maybe add them to the to watch list if I haven't seen them already. For now, we're going to go ahead and call it a video, and I'll just say, class dismissed.